little bit excited to be doing this episode. A couple of things are a little bit different about me today. Obviously, I have cut my hair, so anyone who follows me on TikTok, you will have seen my little hair transformation. I think it was probably shortly after the wedding that I decided I really wanted to change my hair, but I was like, oh, it took me so long to grow it out and make it really pretty and stuff like that, but it was just getting so long and it was getting so hard to maintain that I was like, chop it off. So here we are. With my new hair. I've got some new nails today as well. So we are in the month of October, Halloween. So you can see that I've got a Halloween Care Bear. I've got my little Mexican lady, and I've got some candles in the background for you guys. Also, you will see more than likely little Frankie running around in the background, so I do apologise. He's out and about at the moment. He has been coming just through there and just trying to piff my hair and stuff like that while I've been prepping. So a little bit funny, but let's get to today's episode, guys. Probably everyone I know has seen a documentary or heard about this one. I'm sure you've all listened to a podcast about him. He's definitely a cult figure, and the fact that he didn't actually murder anyone is probably the most shocking part. Or he's suspected of murdering someone, but he didn't actually get convicted. He got convicted, but he hadn't actually murdered anyone. So I'm sure you've all guessed it by now, but we're talking about Charlie Manson. Now, you hear that name, what's going to come to mind, right? The cult leader, the murders, the chaos of the late 1960s. But here's the question, right? Was he born evil, or was he shaped by the world around him? Now, he is definitely one for me that I definitely sit here and go, I think this is a nurture and nature experience. The reason I say that is he had probably one of the worst childhoods I've ever learned about, I've ever researched, anything like that. Selling people for a pack of cigarettes and his mum doing that. He's not had any consistency. He's had a lot of rejection. He's had a lot of abandonment. There is just so much in his world that it is just insane to me that I'm not shocked he turned out the way he did, but the way he adapted from all of his experiences and things like that. It's really, really quite terrifying that he shaped himself into this cult leader of manipulation and control, all those types of things. But look, I am getting ahead of myself again. So let's start. So before the headlines, before the bloodshed, there's a little boy, and a boy who's never really had a chance. Or at least from my perspective, I don't feel like he had a chance in this world. Back at the beginning on November 12th in 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Great Depression is still gripping all of America. In a small hospital, a baby is born to a 16-year-old mother. Her name is Kathleen Maddox. She names him Charles, 16 years old. Can you imagine this? She's a teenager. She's barely coming out of childhood herself, and suddenly she's responsible for Charles Manson. And Charles's father, a man named Walker Scott, I think it was, who disappeared before the baby had even arrived. So from day one, his life is already marked by abandonment. Kathleen's not ready for motherhood in any way, shape or form. She's rebellious. She's impulsive. She's already sort of living on the edge. She's drinking. She's drifting. She's getting in and out of trouble. And really, baby Charles, he's just along for the ride. Picture this though, a little boy moving from rundown apartment from one, never knowing where he's going to sleep next. There's no safety. It's all just a life of chaos. Now then, when Charles was 5 years old, everything changes. Kathleen was arrested for armed robbery. She's sentenced to prison. So what happens to a 5-year-old when this happens, right guys? He's sent to live with relatives. But this isn't a warm, it's not loving, it's in no way, shape or form what you would want out of a childhood. And it's just a stopgap, really. A place where he felt like a constant outsider, that sense of rejection, it's never going to leave him throughout his whole entire life. Now, by the time he's 9 years old, the cracks are already starting to show. Just a little thing. So his first crime, he steals from a grocery store. It's just a little thing. It's a pack of candy. Now, maybe some food on top of that. But think about it. This is a kid who's never really had enough in life. He's never felt safe. It's almost that this act wasn't like, because I'm hungry, it's about control. And when your life is chaos and the adults around you are failing you at every turn, stealing something, if anything, it feels like a little bit of power, a little bit of control back in my life. And apparently that feeling in Charles was really addictive. But here's the thing, right? Every time he got caught, the punishment, it's not love, it's not guidance, it's rejection, more and more rejection. By the age of 10, he is skipping school, he's breaking into homes. By 13, he was stealing bikes, cars, anything he could really get his hands on, right, guys? And the system, it's not helping him at all. Reform schools in the 1940s, they're not places of rehabilitation, guys. They are warehouses for broken kids. Picture this: cold concrete floors, iron bars, guards who ruled with fists rather than compassion. Beatings were really common. Humiliation was routine. If you were weak, you were quickly seen as prey. So what did Charles do? He adapted. He learned to survive. He learned that charm could be used as a weapon. If he smiled, if he played that part, he could avoid punishment. He became a really big master manipulator before he's even hit his teens. And it worked, but only sometimes, because when it didn't, the consequences were quite often brutal. He was beaten. He was locked in solitary confinement. He's treated like an animal. And every time that happened, something inside him just continued to harden. By the time he is 15, he's in and out of institutions. So really, that was the only home that he sort of ever felt like. And he's actually once said, I spent more time in reform school than I ever did at home. And that's not an exaggeration at all, guys. In and out of those reform homes. So that for him was his comfort. That was his setting of his home. Which, when you think about it, if abuse and beaten and all of those components of those reform schools are what you consider your home, what chance do you have in this world to rehabilitate yourself and to be better? I'm not giving him any excuses, any way, shape, or form, guys. I'm just saying this to me seems like it shaped the man he became. All of these experiences are before he's even like any part of his frontal lobe has grown. It's not finished. It's all of these experiences in his life are leading him down this garden path of, I need to have control. I need to understand where my life is going because it's never enough for me. So it's really insane for me that, of course, this is where his pathway was going to go. Again, guys, I'm not offering excuses for the man. I'm just saying it just makes a lot of sense of how he came about and what he ended up doing. So instead of learning empathy, he learned control. Instead of trust, he learned fear. And he discovered something else. If you can't fight the system, you manipulate it. The mindset, it would end up defining his future and the lives of everyone who really crossed his path. So by the time he turned 17, he's not a troubled kid anymore. He's a survivor, and he's a survivor of the system. He's hardened, he's shaped by years of neglect, abuse, rejection. He's not a killer yet. He's not even close. But the seeds, they're sort of already there. They're underneath that surface. Think about what he has learned in the first 17 years of his life. That love was conditional, if it existed at all. Trust was dangerous, and that control was everything. It's the only way to make sure your life goes in the direction that you want it. He discovered something else, though, in this period of time. People could be tools. If you couldn't beat the system, you could bend it to your will. If you couldn't find family, you could create one, even if it was built on lies. Now, here's the chilling part. Charles didn't just learn to manipulate authority figures. He learned to manipulate everyone and anyone around him. He realized that charm could open doors, that words could be used as weapons. Imagine a teenager, barely out of childhood, already rehearsing the skills that would one day make him essentially a cult leader. The ability to read people, to find their weakness, to make them feel seen, understood, even loved, while pulling their strings from behind the curtain. Now, let me ask you this, though. If someone had stepped in, really stepped in, could things have been different? Maybe, but the truth is Charles Manson's childhood was a perfect storm. Neglect, abuse, and a system that failed him at every turn. Again, it's a nature versus nurture thing. I think it's a very, very good combination of how he came about. So from that storm of that childhood emerged a man who would one day orchestrate one of the most infamous crimes in American history. But how does a boy who spent his youth in reform schools and prison cells transform into a self-proclaimed prophet? How does he go from stealing cars to commanding followers willing to kill for him? And that's a story we're going to uncover throughout this episode. When Charles Manson turned 18, freedom didn't last long once again. He was arrested for stealing a car and sentenced to a federal prison this time. Now let's pause for a second though. Imagine this. You're barely an adult, and instead of stepping into the world with hope, you're stepping into another cage. For most people, prison is a punishment. Charles, it wasn't a form of punishment for him though. It's become something else entirely. Prison was like a classroom for him. It's his training ground. It's how he's going to come about. It's how he's going to learn to build that cult and to build that manipulation. It's behind bars. He found something he had never really had before. It's structure. It's rules. It's a hierarchy that he can study, he can exploit, and he did. He watched everything, how the guards moved, how the inmates interacted, who held the real power. And here's what he learned. Power isn't just strength. It's about influence. If you can make people feel important, if you can make them believe something like that they need, they'll follow you anywhere and everywhere. He started really small, running errands for older inmates, listening more than he spoke, but slowly he's building a reputation, not as just the toughest guy in the yarn, but as the guy who could talk his way out of anything. While he's learning about people, he was also learning philosophy. He devoured books on psychology, on religion, control. He read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he didn't just read it though, guys. He weaponized it. Every principle, every tactic, he turned it into a tool of manipulation and power. And then there was music. In prison, Charles picked up guitar. Music became his escape, his identity as such. He would dream of nothing but fame and fortune and becoming the next best thing. And in the 60s, with the counterculture movement exploding, the dream didn't actually seem that far-fetched. But here's another chilling part. Prison didn't rehabilitate Charles Manson. It refined him. It took a broken kid and it turned him into something far more dangerous. A man who understood that control wasn't about force. It was about persuasion. By the time he walked out of prison in 1967, after spending more than half of his life in institutions, Charles Manson wasn't just a petty criminal anymore. He was a man with a plan. And the world he's about to enter, it's the perfect stage for this performance. It's interesting because this period of time in life, it's all about flower power. It's all about exploding controversies and coming out of an awakening and feminism and hippie movements and just about being yourself. So it's almost like the world was a stage for him and how he could manipulate it and play and get the players to act the way that he wanted. And it was a perfect storm. It was people wanted to be followed. People wanted to follow him. They wanted to understand him. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to take a drink. Raspberry lemonade today. Picture this, San Francisco, 1967, the summer of love. The streets are alive with music, colour, and a lot of rebellion. Young people are rejecting all the old rules. They're searching for freedom, for meaning, for something bigger than just themselves. Into this world walks Charles Manson, a man who spent half of his life behind bars, stepping into a society that feels like another planet almost for him. And here's the thing. It's perfect. It's a perfect surrounding for him. Why? Because the counterculture movement was built on vulnerability. These were kids, many of them teenagers who'd run away from home, who felt like they were misunderstood, and they're just desperate to feel like they belong to something. And Charles knew exactly what to say to people who felt lost. He starts out really small, a conversation here, a smile there. He tells them what they really want to hear, right? You're special, you're beautiful, the world doesn't understand you, but I do. And especially during that time, and especially during those teenage years, that is exactly what you want to hear from a grown adult, that they understand you and they want to be your friend. They want to understand who you are. And it works because young women especially, they're drawn to him. He offers them what they crave: love, acceptance, a sense of purpose. He plays the role of a gentle guru and a man who sees their soul. Now, I've got to say, I'm not sure myself, how I would feel, Charlotte, about this man, considering I don't think he's particularly, he's not a good looking man, he's not anything special, but I'm guessing that level of charisma, and they talk about it a lot on the documentaries, he had a real level of charisma. And I think that sometimes that charisma and that wanting to belong so desperately, it just leaves you in a very vulnerable state for men like you. And look, we've seen it a couple of times with, I'm going to give some bad examples here, but NXIVM, Keith Raniere, we've got Warren, I can't remember, he's a prophet, but it's just these men, they're not particularly anything fabulous, guys, but women fall underneath this spell, and I wonder, they just must pick these vulnerable people who just want to be loved, they want to belong, and all of those circumstances. So I'm not going to say anything that I don't think I'd fall for something like that. I think there were definitely some formative years there that I would have fallen for cult-like behavior, and I would have just wanted to belong. So I will never, ever denigrate someone for wanting to feel that love and wanting to feel like they belong to someone. So anyway, getting back to Charlie Manson. Underneath that soft voice, these promises of peace, it's all about control. He's using music to lure them in. He's singing songs about freedom and love. He's using drugs to break down their defenses, to blur those lines between reality and fantasy. And he uses psychological tricks, things he's learned in prison, and it's to keep them loyal, right? Soon he's got a little following. They call him Charlie. They see him as a guide, a prophet. And he feeds off that image. He talks about peace, he talks about love, he talks about harmony, and he also is starting to plant those little seeds of fear, though. He tells them that the world is ending, that a race war is coming, and that they, his family, they'll survive because they follow him. And they believe him completely. By the end of 1967, Charles Manson isn't just a man, he's a movement, and the world has absolutely no idea what's about to happen. By 1968, Charles' influence has grown beyond just a handful of those followers. He now has a tribe, a devoted group of young men and women who call themselves the family. They start out in San Francisco, and soon they move to a place that feels like another world. It's Spahn Ranch, and this is like an old movie set in the California desert. It's got Western sort of feels. It's got saloons, it's got stables. It's relics of a Hollywood that's been long gone. It's the perfect backdrop for a man who wants to play the role of a prophet, though. And I'm not sure if you've seen Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time. It actually has, it's really fabulous how much they've recreated it. Like at the ranch, though, it's quite different. There's no clocks, there's no schedules, there's no rules, except Charlie's rules. And Charlie's rules, they sort of change every day. He preaches that society is corrupt, that the end is near, and that they, his chosen family, are destined to survive this race war that's coming. He talks about love, he talks about freedom, he talks about peace. But behind those words, there's just something all that much darker. It's all about that control. And here's a terrifying part. He doesn't just demand obedience, he demands devotion, unquestioning devotion. He uses every tool he's learnt in his life: manipulation, fear, love bombing, to keep all of that control. He isolates his followers from the outside world. He convinces them that he's more than just a man. He's a prophet, maybe even Christ reborn. And when you believe your leader is a prophet, you want to do whatever they want you to do. He knows this, though. He tests them. He pushes their boundaries. He asks for really small things at the start. You steal this, lie about this. And when they start to do it without question, he asks for even more. I'm so sorry, guys. My little puppy dog just wants to go outside, so just excuse me for one moment. Sorry, it's a gorgeous day in Melbourne, and she wants to be outside, and I can understand that. So he uses LSD to break down some of their sense of self, to make them more malleable. He tears them down. He tells them that their ego is the thing that's bringing them down. It's their enemy, that individuality is all part of an illusion. And then he replaces that illusion with himself. Soon the family is not just a group of people, it's a hive mind almost. A world where Charlie's world is just law, and when reality bends to his will, where love and loyalty are measured by obedience. So if anybody's watched Stranger Things, hive mind, you all think like one. So when you hurt one, you hurt them all. So he's building this little hive mind of you will only think like I think. So it's very, very compelling. Like when you watch these documentaries, how he systematically broke down people through the use. And it wasn't just through LSD, by the way, guys. I'm not alluding to that. He used drugs in a way that was very influential to get them to think about things the way he wanted them to. So he manipulated it through the drugs. I'm not saying drugs are good or anything like that. I'm just saying I don't want to get 10 freaking comments on the fact that I've said that. So he's not just satisfied with obedience, though. He wants chaos. He wants to ignite this race war that he calls Helter Skelter. He tells them it's coming, a violent uprising that will destroy the world. And when it does, they're going to rise from the ashes as these new rulers. Here's the thing. He doesn't want to wait for the war. He wants to start it. He wants to light that match. And that match is coming. Let me ask you something, though, before I begin our next little segment. How far would you go to belong? What would you do for someone who says they see you, that you matter, and that you are chosen? Because for a small group who are living under Charlie's voice, the answer ends up being absolutely anything. He truly believed that the world was speaking to him through signs, through symbols, and most of all, through music. To him, the Beatles' White Album wasn't just a collection of songs. It's got coded messages in there. It's really odd. I think there was way too much LSD and other things being done. But he's seeing a prophecy in this. And he told his followers that the track Helter Skelter wasn't just about a carnival slide. It's about the coming apocalypse, a race war that's going to end up tearing America apart. He said that the lyrics were instructions and that he was the only one who could interpret them. Now, pause for a minute and just think about that, right? Imagine being young, lost, and searching for meaning in a world that feels like it's broken. And then someone comes along and tells you, you're not lost, you're chosen, you're a part of a plan, you're part of a plan bigger than anything you've ever known. And that's exactly what Charles Manson is telling these people. It would become alluring, it would become intoxicating. He's painting a picture of chaos, cities burning, society collapsing, and his family, the chosen few, are emerging as rulers of this new world. And he calls it Helter Skelter, and he just didn't predict it. He's promising it. He's saying it's coming. Now, here's the thing. He's not a very patient man. He wants to not wait for this storm. He's bringing it. He's told his followers, we don't sit back and watch. We make it happen. We light that fuse. And they believed him completely. Like you would at this stage, because he has manipulated you for so long into believing that this is what your cause is in life. Because by this point, they're primed, they're ready. They've given up their names, their past, their sense of self. They've surrendered everything to him. And in return, he gave them something that they craved desperately: identity, belonging, purpose. And if you were always a second choice, Charlie made you feel like you were first. And if you were ignored, he made you look into your own soul. And he thought, if you were lost, I'm going to give you a map. And that map, unfortunately, led to one destination. And it's really obedience. Total, unquestioning obedience. And when obedience becomes absolute, morality disappears. Right and wrong, they sort of blur those lines, right? And the only voice that matters is the one that's telling you what to do next. The voice in this case happened to be Charlie's, and soon that voice is going to command them to kill. On August 8, 1969, a warm summer night in Los Angeles, 4 members of the family climb into a car. Now we've got Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Caspian. Their destination, it's Cello Drive, a house Manson had visited before and a house that he genuinely believed that symbolized the world he hated: wealth, fame, and privilege. But I'm going to tell you why he hated this one in particular, this house. And it all starts with a Beach Boy. So we're in April of 1968. Dennis Wilson, he's a drummer for the Beach Boys. He's cruising along the Pacific Coast Highway when he spots two young, really good-looking women hitchhiking. Their names are Patricia and Ella. He pulls over in his car, offers them a ride, and drops them off without any sort of next thought. Now, Dennis Wilson doesn't know this yet, but he sort of started that tumbleweed, and that tumbleweed just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But those women aren't completely done with Dennis. Just 5 days later, he sees the same two women coming for another ride. This time, he takes them back to his home in Sunset Boulevard. He later recalled telling the girls about his spiritual journey, and in return, they actually tell him about their guru, a man named Charles Manson. He's fresh out of prison after 12 years, and that night, Dennis heads to a recording session. When he returns, he feels like something is completely off. Standing in his driveway is Charles Manson. Inside the house, a dozen strangers, mostly young women, they're making themselves at home. I think those two women were a lure for Charlie Manson. I don't know if they were out there trying to find someone's celebrity, but they found him. And just like that, Dennis's world it starts to take quite a dark turn. But he's intrigued by Charlie Manson. He even called him the wizard in an interview one time. Over the next 6 months, the Manson family, they're living in his home. They cook, they clean, they cater to him, at least on the surface. But it's a really bizarre sort of house guest situation. He introduced Charlie to a music industry heavyweight, including Terry Melcher. He's a music producer. Now, get this. Charlie Manson even recorded a track at Brian Wilson's studio. Songs that the public I believe they've heard them now, but hadn't heard them at that stage. And one of his songs, Charlie Manson's songs, Cease to Exist, was even reworked by the Beach Boys into a song called Never Learn Not to Love. It's released on the B-side of a track. There's no credit to Charlie Manson. Now, Dennis would claim that Charlie gave up his rights in exchange for about $100,000 worth of goods. But things spiraled really quickly from this. The family wrecked 2 of his luxury cars. They stole nearly everything out of his home. And when he finally cuts ties, Manson would actually send him a chilling message, a bullet, which was delivered to his housekeeper. Now, this house they're going to belongs originally to Terry, and that's who they're after. But Manson's followers, they really didn't care. It was really about starting this murder spree to start Helter Skelter. Inside this house is actress Sharon Tate. She's 8.5 months pregnant. Her friend Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and her partner. Outside, a young man by the name of Stephen Parent sits in his car near the gate. He never makes it home. The family cuts all the phone lines. They scale the fence. They carry knives, a gun, and something far, far more dangerous, a certainty of murder. Think about that for a moment. They're young people. They're hippies who once believed in the act of peace and love. Now they're walking into a home with only one thing on their minds: murder. Because Charlie's told them to. Because he said this is the first step towards Helter Skelter. When they enter this house, chaos absolutely erupts. It just erupts. Tex takes control. At one point, he says the words that will echo throughout history for many, many years: I am the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business. The victims, as everybody is aware, they plead for their lives. Sharon Tate begs them to spare their unborn child. There's absolutely no mercy in what they do to them. By the time this night ends, 5 people are dead. The killers have smeared the word pig on the front door in blood, and a message meant to ignite that war. Now, if you think that's where the horror ends, it doesn't, because the very next night they do it again. This time their targets are Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Tate-LaBianca, an ordinary couple that are living inside Los Angeles. They've got no connection to Sharon Tate, no connection to Hollywood. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The family enters their home. The murders were even more brutal this time. Words like death to the pigs and Helter Skelter are sprawled across the walls. It's in blood. 2 nights, 7 victims. There's no clear motive. Los Angeles is pretty much paralyzed with fear at this stage. People start locking their doors. Rumors spread like wildfire. Fear's becoming a real life living thing. But inside the family, Charlie's really calm. He tells them, this is just the beginning. The world will burn and we will rise. But the world doesn't burn. The war doesn't come. And in that silence, something begins to start to crack. Doubt, pressure. There's cracks in that illusion. Because when the prophecy fails, reality comes crashing in. And for Charles Manson, that reality is about to hit hard. And it's going to hit harder than anything else. There is some absolutely grotesque details from all of those murders. I've chosen not to discuss them. I just think that Sharon Tate and her friends, Jay, Abigail, Stephen, who was just, I believe he was house sitting. I can't even remember, and I'm so sorry, or something like that. And it was just the people that died that night. There is enough horror that everybody already knows what happened to them. They also know what happened to the LaBiancas. I'm not willing to sort of get into those details. It's just not really what I want to get into on the podcast. I'm happy to do an episode on the victims and talk about them. But this is probably a little bit more about Charles Manson and his impacts in the world. So I apologize if that's what you wanted, but that's sort of not where I'm going to go with this one. So while Los Angeles is reeling from these murders, the investigation's going nowhere. Detectives have no suspects. They've got no motive. It's really just a city gripped with fear. Now, this is when the first cracks start to appear, and it's all in a jail cell. So Susan Atkins, she's a 21-year-old drifter with long hair, haunting smile. She's locked up on unrelated charges, and she's not just any inmate, though. She is one of Charles Manson's most devoted followers, and she couldn't keep her mouth shut. It's actually been quoted that she said this. You know those murders on Cello Drive? That was us. She's bragging to her cellmates about killings, how they tied up the victims, how they wrote words in blood on the walls. She spoke about it with such pride. It's almost like she had some twisted badge of honor from doing this. Her cellmates, absolutely horrified. They tell authorities really quickly, and suddenly all the pieces are starting to fall into place. Detectives start digging a little bit deeper. They discover a strange commune living on a ranch. It's dusty, it's decaying movie set on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The group is calling themselves the Family. At the center of it all, there's Charlie Manson, a failed musician, and he's now turned into a self-proclaimed prophet. He preached about an impending race war, this Helter Skelter. Borrows the name from a Beatles song, for goodness sakes. Manson's told his followers that these murders are about to spark that chaos. But the police have sort of no idea that this is where this was going to lead. And this isn't just a murder case anymore, though. The police are discovering that this is actually a cult. And it's a doomsday prophecy cult. And a man who ends up convincing others to kill for him. In October 1969, the investigation, it's led them to this ranch. It looked like something out of an old Western to them. But what they found at that particular ranch was far, far darker. They're living in absolute filth, though. They're scavenging, stealing food, they're stealing cars, and they're worshipping this man. Now, police weren't there for murder, at least not yet. They're investigating an auto theft, and they had this hunch that this strange commune was connected to the killings. Now, when officers stormed the ranch, they arrested dozens of people, and among them happened to be Charles Manson. But he did not go quietly. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He actually ended up hiding like a scared little boy, and they found him curled up inside a tiny little cabinet, smiling. Calm, almost amused at this. And when he's asked about the murders later, I didn't tell them to kill anyone. They did what they wanted to do. So he is already lambs to the wolves, basically. He does not care about his followers at all. He's not going back to jail. But Susan, she's telling a completely different story. In her confession, she would brag, Charlie told us what had to be done. He said, leave something witchy, so we wrote in blood. She described that night in vivid detail how they tied up the victims, how they stabbed the victims, how they positioned them, and it was just absolutely appalling. Some of the most seasoned detectives were absolutely shocked at some of the disgusting things they had done to those victims. We wanted to show the world that Helter Skelter was coming. His arrest, so Charlie's arrest, marked the beginning of probably one of the most sensational trials in American history. Even in custody, his grip on his followers, it didn't break. They carved X's into their foreheads just like him. They sang songs outside the courthouse. To all his followers, he's not a criminal. He's their messiah. In June 1970, he enters the courtroom with an X covered on his forehead. When he's asked about it, I've X'd myself from this world. Days later, his followers outside the courthouse, they're carving it into their own skin. They're chanting his name. And we've seen this before with Keith Raniere and NXIVM. A lot of his followers still sit outside his jail cell and they'll chant his name and they'll do all these kind of things. So they still follow him. Now, inside, the women on trial were Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten. They giggle, they whisper, they even sing during their testimony. They seem really, really proud of what they've done. Now, the prosecutor at the time, Vincent, faced a real challenge because Charlie Manson had never killed anyone himself. But he did argue that it was his control over his followers that was absolute. Now, his words were as deadly as any type of weapon. So he actually told the jury, he ordered them to kill and they obeyed. The motive, that bizarre prophecy about Helter Skelter. And he thought how this murders would ignite this Helter Skelter. Now, Charlie Manson, thrived on all this chaos. At one point, he leapt across the defense table towards the judge and he screamed, in the name of Christian justice, someone should cut off your head. I would have thought some of that would have been concerned with insanity and possible mental things. When he's asked if he feels remorse, he smirked and said, remorse for what? You're the ones killing the planet. Now, at the same time, his followers are echoing his defiance. Susan Atkins actually told the court, you can lock us up, but you can't lock up the truth. All the while, the family's still outside this courthouse and they're supporting Charlie, really, really signaling, almost waiting for him for some type of signal of what to do next. So after 9 months, and it's the longest and most expensive trial in California history at the time, the verdicts all come down. It's guilty on all counts. So even Manson is found guilty on all counts. His followers him and his followers were sentenced to death. But in 1972, California abolished the death penalty and their sentences were actually commuted to life in prison. Now, the trial of Charles Manson wasn't just about murder. It's all about that manipulation. It's all about that control and the terrifying power of belief in what someone can say to you. Charles Manson, he's an icon almost to this day. He spends the next 4 decades after he's been sentenced behind bars. The prison walls, they still don't silence him. He gives interviews. He rambles on. He's being very cryptic. He's sometimes quite terrifying because in one of his interviews, he says, I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a hobo. I'm only what you made me. In another, he stares directly at the camera and says, you think I'm the devil? I am what you made me. Even locked away, he's become a real sort of twisted icon for evil. But outside prison walls, that family, they sort of never truly disappear. Some followers actually ended up remaining loyal to him for decades. There was a Lynette Squeaky From, and she's one of his most devoted disciples. She even attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford in 1975. Others have tried to get parole, claiming they were brainwashed, and the families of the victims fought back every time. And then there was the copycats. There's the fascination, the fan letters, people who saw Manson not as a murderer, but as like a culture anti-hero. Because at the end of the day, Manson understood something terrifying. People crave meaning. And with all of the chaos in the late 1960s, he really offered it to them, even if it's at that time drenched in blood and murder. His shadow, it stretches far beyond a courtroom. There's books, there's movies, there's songs, there's from Hollywood films to true crime documentaries. His stories, even me, I'm hearing here, retelling his story. And it does happen again and again, because it's almost like that peace and love, it shattered that 1960s dream of, peace and love on the earth. Instead, it gave way to a lot of fear and a lot of bloodshed. Now, one of the prosecutors, Vincent, he said Manson was the end of the 1960s. And maybe that's why we don't sort of look away. Maybe his story isn't just about murder. It's about all of these things and coming to an end, right? Now, in November 2017, Charlie dies in a California hospital at the age of 83. Even in death, he's remaining infamous. His name still sparks a lot of fear. His image, his wild eyes, his tangled hair, it sort of still chills you a little bit to the bone. Because Charles Manson, he's not just a man, he's a mirror. He reflects the darkness that can lurk in all of us. He's always going to be an icon, and I do truly, truly believe that. And it's an icon of evil, but he's still an icon. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Crimes from the Peanut Gallery. The Manson case does remind us that evil doesn't always come with a gun in a hand. Sometimes it comes with a smile, a song, and a promise of belonging. Now, if you found this story as chilling as I did, please subscribe, hit that like button, leave a comment. Stay tuned for my next episode, where we delve into another twisted tale of a serial killer. Until then, stay safe and be vigilant. Have a great weekend, my fellow peanuts. See you later, guys.